Have you ever read design patterns? Are you even a software developer, bro?
No, I do JavaScript. No, I just copy and paste off Stack Overflow.
Samesies.
No, I haven't read this.
Stack Overflow as a service would be a good startup.
How does that work? I just start typing in my editor and it auto-corrects.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I think you have like a little intercom widget in your editor. You just put something there, and then the highest voted Stack Overflow answer. No, it's never the highest voted. It's the one you look for. The algorithm would be look for the first Stack Overflow answer that has a comment that says the most upvoted answer is wrong. This is really the right one.
Right.
And
then it would just insert some jQuery into your code.
Yeah, exactly. Because that one's always the right one. How's your week been going?
Good. Bit of Ember, bit of Rails code this week. I did a file upload from an Ember app. You upload a file directly to S3. And that was surprisingly easy.
You've done it a couple times now.
Yeah.
In like the last year or two.
Yes, yeah.
And it's different, like if you were to go back 4 years, how you would do it.
Yeah, so like maybe like 5 years ago, I'm uploading a file directly to the web server, and then from the web server kind of deciding what to do with the file. So you would send it to like a PHP app, and the PHP app could write it to disk, or like shell it out to like a image resizing process and then write it to disk. But this, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, I haven't used this pattern because with S3, it's so easy to upload from the browser to S3, and that way you don't block your application server, right? So if you have like 5 people uploading files to your application server, that's kind of 5 threads that your application server is just sitting with, dealing with the file upload.
And all those clients are idle, so why not let them do it, basically?
Yeah.
Let them do the uploading and then just save the path, basically, back to the server.
Exactly. So we upload the file. So the way it works is the Ember app says, I want to upload a file, or the browser says, okay, I'm ready to upload a file. And the Ember app goes to the application server and says, hey, I'd like to upload a file to S3. And the application server sends back a signature. So
this is not so the backend's not seeing the file.
The backend's not seeing the file.
It's literally a request to say this is what I intend to do.
The request is like the name of the file and the type of the file. You can send anything in the request you want, but we send like the name of the file and the type of the file. So we'd say I want to upload, photo.jpg and it's an image file. The backend, the Rails app, the application server, is then going to take that and create a signature and give that back to the Ember app. And that signature has, it's like signed with a private key that sits on the back end. And that authorizes the browser to upload this file with this name to S3.
Directly to S3.
Yeah.
So that not anyone can just throw files onto our S3 bucket.
Right. So it's not like our S3 bucket's public. You would, our Rails server would say, okay, are you logged in? Do you have access? And if everything checks out, it'll respond with this signature. And then the Ember app then goes and talks to S3 and says, hey, I'm ready to upload this file. I have the file and I have the signature, and S3 accepts it.
Nice.
And the beauty of this is the backend and S3 never talk to each other, because it's all with a private key that was agreed upon like way
when
beforehand.
You configured everything.
When you configure everything.
So that's a follow-up question. Now we've done this a couple of times. What are the parts that are different each time, and what can be encapsulated? Like, why can't we just have a file uploader? If we did have a file uploader that was exactly written how we wanted it, what would the configuration involve?
Yeah. So the Ember side, we do have a file upload component,
and we could use it in all of our apps.
We do use it in all of our apps. We kind of tweak the styling across apps, but I think we could come up with a generic reusable component here. The biggest pain is the S3 configuration. So this time I was dealing with something where I wanted only logged in users to be able to upload files. Once they upload the file, though, no one can see it. So they were uploading like secure documents. So there's a lot of configuration on the Amazon side to say, okay, like when you create a file, it's private. If the user wants to view the file, the backend has to generate a signature that gives them like public read access to view that file. So this is a thing that's different. Like there's some apps where you're like uploading a profile photo. If you're doing that, you want that to upload but be public. So the S3 bucket's going to be configured a little differently.
What makes it hard? I mean, if there was a startup that was just solving this problem, like what would your ideal step look like?
Yeah, so there are tons. Again, because I was dealing with like secure file uploads, kind of had to drop down to the S3 configuration layer.
And that's where it becomes not fun, basically.
Right. It becomes reading a lot. I mean, the Amazon docs are extremely technical.
But the UI is really good, so at least that compensates.
The UI is awful. No, AWS is made for developers. It's made for...
Therefore, it has bad UIs.
Yeah. No, it's made for people that want to
programmatically.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
No, I've used some image uploading services, and those are amazing when you want to upload something publicly. Those are perfect.
User uploaded content is going to be on a public website or something like that.
And if we were doing something again where it's public profile photo, that's what I would go with.
Right.
The reason this was so much configuration is just because it's the security stuff.
Right. Cool.
But I used Ember CLI Ember file upload by Tim Evans.
Mm-hmm.
It is an awesome add-on. It has like S3 support built into it. I think the upload component is like 40 lines, and it does everything. It has like Ember concurrency task. It has like progress bar.
Oh, cool.
So it's the Ember side is
well abstracted.
Yeah, there's not much code. It's kind of funny, but I can't believe I'm going to say this, but there's not much code on the Ember side. Usually it's the other way around. There's not much code on the back end. It's all in the Ember app.
Right.
But this time, there's not a lot of Ember code, which is great. That's where we want to be as Ember developers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, leveraging the add-on ecosystem.
Yep.
Cool.
How about you? What'd you do this week?
Well, I wrote a unit test.
Yeah, that's a first.
It's a first in a long time. I like deleting unit tests.
Do you like writing unit tests and then deleting them?
I actually like coming into new apps and just deleting the entire unit test folder and all of the auto-generated tests that are there and tricking everyone into thinking that we have good unit test coverage when reality is you don't, and you don't need it because, like we've talked about before, like the units of Ember are well tested.
Right.
And mostly we're just piecing them together. But no, this part I was actually writing some complicated logic on a user model, and so it was way easier to drop into a unit test, give the user some setup. It was auth and roles, and so I wanted to see if the user was authorized for different roles, and there's all these there's a matrix of possibilities that the user can have permissions to, and so it was good.
Nice.
But that's my one unit test for the 6 months, I guess. So
yeah. See you next year. What with the unit tests, like what kind of tools do you use? Just QUnit assertions? What's like the setup look like here?
I got lucky. Like I didn't have to do needs. I didn't have to wire anything up. It was literally just state on the user.
I mean, I would say this is a good sign of a unit test.
Exactly.
If you're wiring stuff up in a unit test, it's probably
an integration,
not a unit test.
Right, exactly. Probably not a unit test. So that was nice. It's a very simple, clean file, and it's just stressing some logic on a function, basically. And that's like, again, that's a great use case for unit test. So I didn't have to install any new helpers or anything like that. No async stuff, all sync logic.
Nice.
So, yeah, it was good.
Nice.
Yeah. Last week we've been talking about this add-on that it's kind of vaporware right now, but it's in the works.
The best add-on.
Best add-ons are vaporware. But we use it, to some extent, but it's kind of a place where we can drop ideas for how we want to amend Ember Data with some APIs that we think are important. We talked about that.
This is our Storefront add-on.
Exactly, Storefront, Ember Data Storefront. And we came up with a new use case this week for it.
Yeah, so I was dealing with a situation where it's an unlikely situation, but I'm saving a model, and for whatever reason, the backend errors. and I want to display a message on the screen that basically says, hey, sorry, I couldn't handle this right now, try again, or shoot us an email. And it's kind of hard to do this in Ember Data, right? Ember Data has like an isError property, but it also has like isValid property. And, you could send a request to the server, and the server could respond with 422, unprocessable entity HTTP status code. And that means your save didn't work. But on the Ember Data side, the model would be isError would be false and isValid would be false. So you can't really rely on isError alone to know if your model saved or not.
So the isError and the isValid computed properties on Ember Data models, those were designed to make certain common error scenarios like convenient to work with. Basically, that was the idea there.
Yeah, exactly.
So like a 422 would put your model in a
is valid equals false state.
Right. So it doesn't have is invalid, but is valid will be false if you're back in 422s.
Right. And the idea here is like a 422 isn't really an error. Like it's something you can correct. So it's like a validation failed. Mm-hmm. So it's not, the app isn't in an error state.
It's not like an exception. It's something that you can anticipate could happen.
Exactly.
As opposed to like my database server is down or something like that.
Exactly.
And then what about isError? That will be true when...
There's a few cases here, but it's basically 500,
right.
Certain 400 errors.
Right. But basically these turn out to sometimes be, what you really want is just, you want more insight into the error that happened on the back end. And you really want some high level thing that says, this wasn't a success. And then you want to be able to dive down and say, okay, what were the error messages?
Exactly.
Or what was the error response? What was the code? What was the response text, etc.?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to be able to, when a save doesn't work, you want to be able to peel back all those layers and get at something. And hopefully you don't need to dive in there. Hopefully you have like, your backend's responding with like a JSON API errors document, and you can just do like each model.errors in your template, and those will display those errors, like things like validation errors and stuff like that. But there are times when your backend doesn't have JSON API errors payload, or there's just some random 499 error.
Right, and you would want to control that. Like how you present that error to the user is a template concern.
Exactly.
And so if my thing is a 500, I don't necessarily want to display whatever information's in that payload. Like maybe I just want to say, whoops, something happened.
Yeah, try again. Email us if it keeps happening.
Right. But the isValid and the isError, the idea of those being properties on the model is the right idea, right? You wouldn't want to have an action and then handle a response that's kind of out of band and do some other path. The fact that it puts the model in an error state is good, because then your templates can still be declarative, right, based on the state of the model. It's just that we wanted more control over, we wanted more insight into the state of that model when it is in an error state.
Right. And we also don't want to check, you don't want to write statements that are like if or is error invalid.
Right.
Sorry, there is no invalid. So it would be
not
like,
is
not
valid,
yeah.
Or
so
is error.
Exactly. So just like the fact that we have to think about this is, I just want to say, like, did the server error?
Did the server error? If so, now let me break it down. If I want, I can just say something happened, try again. If I want to go more granular, I could say, so what's the API that we are kind of working with?
Yeah, so our adapter, when it saves a record, it will, if the server comes back with anything that's an error response, it will set a server error property on the model. And that model is, there's a few things in there. There's like the payload that came back from the server, the status number, and the headers that came back from the server. So you can kind of break that down. Now, none of my code digs into those things. Again, I just have an if statement that's,
we have like a did server error computed property that checks if that server error payload is there. Because if it's set, if it is present in the payload, in the response, the adapter puts it on there. And then if you were to resave it and it's not there, this code that sits in the adapter layer would remove that.
Yeah, exactly. So if you resave it and the save goes through successfully, you just pull that error code right out. So it's kind of like the last time you tried to save error response.
Right.
But again, the use case here is, you're filling out a form, you click save, and it doesn't work, and like you have no validation errors. You don't know why it didn't work, and you don't really want to like try to figure that out. You just want to say a message. Okay, it didn't work. Try again.
Right. And this is a nice way to do that.
Yeah.
Cool. So you were working with a new app or upgrading an app where you started getting a lock file? No, it was your new computer.
Yeah. I got a new computer.
So you installed Node.
I did. I got a new computer and
which is sweet, by the way.
Yeah, new MacBook Pro. Friggin' love it.
Nice. I'm jealous.
I installed NVM.
Node Version Manager.
And this project I'm working on had an NVM RC file pinned to 6.9, Node 6.9. But because I had a new computer and I did a fresh install of Node 6.9, I got npm 5. And npm 5, when you npm install, has I think it's like package lockfile.json.
So that was a new Git. It was new in the Git repository, just from cloning the repo and running npm install.
Yes, yep. And this is my first time interacting with Node with npm's lockfile. I'm familiar with lockfiles from Bundler and Yarn.
And this project doesn't use Yarn.
Correct.
So we didn't have a Yarn lock file in it.
Right. This is a npm Node project.
Right. So that was it's kind of confusing in the sense of, okay, what do you do with it? And we were talking a little bit about how lock files work for projects and apps versus libraries and add-ons, things like that.
Right. So I wanted to, I just want to see like, where did this come from? First of all, I had no idea I was on npm 5. I just did nvm use. I installed 6.9 and then npm install. And all of a sudden I get this file. I'm like, whoa.
So that's interesting, even though it was the same Node version.
But
they bumped it somehow that uses a later version of npm.
Exactly, yep. So I looked at the npm docs, and they talk about the lock file, the package lock file. And there's a line in there about how if you're publishing a package, this lock file doesn't get used. And I had some questions like, do I have to be concerned about this? If I'm in an add-on and I see the lock file change, like what
steps do you take?
Yeah, what do I have to do?
Right. So then we were talking about that, and it reminded me of some of the discussion when Yarn was first being designed. They had this conversation. I remember reading some of Yehuda's thoughts here, where he was talking about should lock files be committed to repositories of libraries or respected if they were in the repository of a library. Basically, if you think of the dependency graph of any project, when you are at the top and run npm install or Yarn, then it starts traversing your top level dependencies, and then for those things to install, it has to get those dependencies. And so once you're 2 layers down or more, if we have lock files all the way down, would you respect each one of those? And basically, I think the design for Yarn landed on only respecting top level lock files. And the idea there was that if I'm writing a library, say I'm writing an app and I install add-on A and add-on B. Add-on A, the developer built it using Lodash version 1.1.1. And then add-on B's developer also uses Lodash, and they use version 1.1.2. And for the purposes of their APIs, those things might be compatible, they might not. But the point is, when I run npm install my app, I don't want to end up with both of those versions. Right.
And if they did use those versions, each of their projects would have a lock file locking their add-ons to those versions.
And if the package manager, either Yarn or npm, when it traversed the entire dependency graph, respected everyone's lock files, it would have to pull in both of those versions because it's just looking at lock files, and lock files are specific versions. So unless they happen to be exactly the same version, they wouldn't be able to deduplicate them. So instead, from the discussion I remember about Yarn when it was first being designed was, Yehuda's point was basically, you want especially when you're publishing a library or an add-on, something that's going to be used by others as a sibling with other things, other dependencies, you want to be very liberal in your constraints around the versions of things you use. So, and the place to encode how liberal you are and what those constraints are is the package.json file. So if I'm building add-on A and I need Lodash, it's much better for me to say I can rely on anything Lodash 1.x. So 1. whatever and up. And as long as you give me Lodash 1.x, then my add-on will work. Even though once I actually install it for my local development, let's say I pull down 1.1.1 and I have a lock file now, if anyone else wants to help me develop this, they pull down my repo and install it. They're installing my dependencies in the way I use them from my lock file. And so other developers will get the same version of Lodash that I had.
And this is to keep the development of the add-on consistent.
Exactly. But then when application users start relying on my add-on, then it's important for me to say, you know what, just because I used 1.1.1 locally, all you need to give me is 1.x. And that way, when they install add-on A, it needs 1.x, add-on B, it needs 1.x, then whatever package manager you're using will be able to resolve the graph to one single version, one copy of Lodash. And that's an important thing. But it also comes with this idea that, you know, the people publishing libraries and add-ons in the ecosystem need to be good citizens in order for this to work well. Because what can happen is
they publish 1.3, it's a brand new API change, and now you've just lied in your dependency file where
exactly.
You said 1.x, but that's not true.
Exactly. So there's actually two things here, which is one is that where if libraries are breaking Semver, then those declarations of your intent of your constraints in your package JSON saying like I'm good between 1.0 to 1. whatever, those are going to break because APIs will change, and it's not really true that you can use your library with any version of 1. But the other way it can break is if you encapsulate, if you enforce this behavior in your package manager, but then people aren't good about being as liberal as possible. If they're too conservative, if they're too constrained, and they say my add-on only works with 1.1.1, and they encode that into their package.json file, and then another author says you have to give me 1.1.2. What's going to happen is what happened to you today, right? Which is you're an application developer and you try to install both these add-ons, and you're going to end up with 2 copies of the dependency, and there's basically nothing you can do.
Yeah, interesting. Yep.
So that's for this to work, the people who are authoring reusable code need to understand that it's important for them, to write their code in a way that, you know, when it comes to should I bump this version of a dependency I'm using and take advantage of a new feature? Okay, yes, maybe, but you're going to impose a cost if it forces someone else. It's not going to play as nice with other people who use that same library.
So then as an add-on author, does that mean you want to kind of make sure you're using APIs that are common across like many different versions of Lodash?
I think that's one takeaway. I think there's also ways you could make your add-on work, whether it was using Lodash version 1 or 2, let's say.
So would that be like a conditional in your add-on?
Conditional or a polyfill. I mean, this is, Ember code. A lot of the libraries in the Ember ecosystem do this a lot of times. So add-ons work with multiple versions of Ember, and they polyfill things, or they write conditional code in their index.js or all sorts of things to make it easier. But this is just, it's just something to be aware of. And like the particulars here are pretty complicated. But basically it's different than when you're building an application, right? Because when you're building an application, if I want to use power select, we're on 1.3 and I want to bump power select to 1.4 to take advantage of a new feature in 1.4, I'm going to do that. And I'm just going to throw that in my lock file, and everyone working on the app is going to get it, because when they npm install, they're going to get that latest version. And our app is not being consumed by someone else. So it doesn't matter that we are specific to this one version. But if you're a package author, then when you do that kind of thing, you have to be cognizant of it, because you're probably relying on a package or a library that other add-ons might be relying on. And if you start using very specific features or APIs, it could give headaches to people, basically.
Have you run into this with Mirage at all, where maybe like you jumped the gun a little and went to like a shiny new version
of Lodash? Yeah, actually, Ember Lodash. It was more about the way Ember Lodash included Lodash into add-ons and Ember apps. But I think still it's actually not in an ideal state. But yes, that's definitely happened with Mirage.
And what was the solution here? Did you just like
ping Robert Jackson on Slack?
Nice. That's the easiest way to solve all your Ember problems.
That's such a bad thing to say. The poor guy's overworked. So the last thing we should be doing is telling people to do that. But no, it's still, again, it's like it can just get really complicated because you're dealing with the node side, the build side, the client side and memory. But yes, basically like things like Ember Lodash are actually great because they are the one way that add-ons include Lodash as a dependency. And now instead of everyone putting like crazy versions of Lodash, just the core NPM package in their package JSON, and then doing some import logic in their index files, like Ember Lodash will take care of it. So again, I think that's one solution, is like that abstraction layer to help manage the dependencies, just because dependencies are it's tough.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately there was a time when it was a big problem in Mirage, and then there's a few days where it was just ruining people's days, and then the answer was basically just updating that package.
Nice.
So yeah, there's more details there, but in general, it was a good discussion we had, because it is a different mindset when you come to, and this is true even if you're authoring reusable code to be used within your company, right? Like if you're going to author like a charts library or a style guide component thing, UI components for your team, you want to adopt the mentality of being a library author and thinking about, when it comes to what dependencies I depend on, being aware of the versions and being as liberal as possible in those ranges. Because that'll make sure that your library plays as well with others as possible.
Do you do anything here for like testing where, you say in Mirage, like it's Lodash 1.x, but do you have like a test server that tries to build it with like an app that's using Lodash 1.1, another app that's using Lodash 1.3? Is there anything like that?
That's a good question. If we look at the Ember try config in Mirage, I just pulled this up. This lets you kind of create a matrix of things that your CI server will run on your add-on, all the different versions. And it's easy to go crazy here and like specify a few options. All of a sudden, your build is like running 30 different builds, and
because it's like a matrix.
So exactly. So Ember LTS 2.4, 2.8, 2.12, but also Ember source versions, Ember CLI versions, node versions. As soon as you specify all that, it's like 3 times 7 times 7 or whatever, right? It's a lot. So, but the idea is here that yes, in NPM, in the key of the scenarios of each scenario of Ember try, you can specify different dependencies, NPM dependencies and versions to try, and it'll just add to the scenario. So if I wanted to do 2 scenarios, one for Lodash 1x and one for 2x, I could do that in Ember try, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, because
it sounds like the trade-off there is you can test more, but it's going to take more time.
Right. And I think you can be smart about it. Like we were trying node 6, 7, 8 or something like that. We didn't need to do all that, so we just knocked one of them off.
Nice.
But yeah, definitely, if you're going to publish something that's going to be consumed by others, and you're saying it can be used by all these versions of things, it's good to write tests for them for sure, because this stuff it's easy to get this wrong.
Oh yeah. Well, also it must make the feedback loop. If someone asks you, "Hey, does this work with Ember 2.4?" you can quickly say yes.
Exactly. Yep. So pretty cool. Yeah, the testing tooling in the Ember ecosystem is incredible for stuff amazing. Like this. It's amazing. Yeah. So speaking of the Ember ecosystem, one of the things I've been working on lately in my open source hacking time is this add-on called Ember CLI Addon Docs, which is also vaporware, just my favorite kind of software to work on. I've been working on it with Dan Freeman, and it's not ready yet, but it's basically came from some frustrations I had working on like Mirage's documentation site and just seeing other people spending so much time getting doc sites set up, documenting APIs as they change from one version to the next, browsing documentation sites and realizing too late that I'm looking at the wrong version of it, or reading like master readme and having it not be right.
Nice.
So we're trying to solve that kind of holistically for the Ember add-on ecosystem.
Is this add-on docs? Is it meant to take like YUI or like, documentation about specific classes and specific functions and generate a docs page?
That's definitely part of it.
Or is it more like the guides for Ember where it's more like a story?
Yep. So I think both of those things are important to having a successful open source project. So we're trying to get a good solution for both of those. In Mirage's documentation right now, there's a section for API and it's all just separate markdown files describing the important classes. And ideally, those are just generated, like you said, from doc comments in the source code. So that would be the first step, would be to have a section of the doc site that's an API reference that's automatically pulling, class information and method information from the source code. So that way it's always up to date. Because right now it's like it can fall out of date. That's a problem.
Nice.
And also a lot of people don't do that for their projects because it's a lot of work. But if it was as easy as adding a structured comment to your source code, and then you get free documentation site for your API, like that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that when I first discover an add-on, I want like the story. I want to be told like, I want to see example code. I want to see like really big picture stuff. But then after a few weeks, as I'm using the add-on more and more, I know the story. So I want to see the API code. I want to dive right into it. So I think it's really important that you have both because you can't.
You don't want to show people your classes the first time, their first touch point.
You'll lose them. Yeah. And then also too, if you only show people kind of like the high level, the guides, then, they're not going to get beyond like the basic hello world examples.
Yep. That's really good. Yep. That's actually one of the hard things. Like when we were thinking through the design of what we wanted this to look like, of what we wanted the experience to be like, because you do serve basically those two audiences. And, someone coming to a project as complex as something like Mirage for the first time versus people who've been using it for, 2 years and want to see just, what is that API for on the server? It's just very different. And so search is important here. We looked at other projects like Read the Docs and Gitbook, which are just services that are kind of made for this. And we thought about how we could use those. But we decided we wanted a solution that was unique for Ember just because it would give us some more benefits, easy integration with add-ons and deploys and all this stuff.
Nice.
But from the UX perspective, a lot of those tools we think get it really far along.
Cool. Speaking of deploys, when you write your docs, how are you going to share this?
So this is an add-on, and this is for other add-ons. So it's an add-on for add-ons. So if you're creating an add-on, you're going to install this add-on into your project as a dev dependency, right? It's not something you ship with your add-on. It's something you use for development. And one of the things it does is it gives you some components that you can use to build out your dummy app. So every add-on comes with a dummy app where you can use as a sandbox to test the components you write. But it turns out that it's a really good place to put a full documentation site because you already have an Ember app wired up for you. And it's very likely that you'll want to, if you were showing someone how to use your add-on, you would want to show them in the context of an Ember app, which is one of the reasons why this is so good instead of using something like some static file tool like Jekyll, right?
Because this makes the demoing just so easy.
Exactly. You already have, it's just an Ember app and it already has all of your classes registered that you've created. And so that's the decision that we landed on, where you actually use the dummy app and we give you some building blocks like easy ways to make examples of your components so that you can easily show off how they're used and link to the source code, parts of the source code where those examples are being used from. So there's lots of cool stuff we can do by being so tightly integrated. So the docs site, the source code for the docs site for your add-on actually lives in your add-on. It just lives in the test dummy folder. And then when it comes to publishing, there's some tooling that already existed in the Ember ecosystem that lets you just build that app as you would, because again, it's a full Ember app. So you can take your add-on and you can run Ember build. And what that's going to do is going to build the dummy app in your test folder. You end up with a static Ember app with all of your, all of your classes documented from the comments. All of that stuff is built into Broccoli. Now you just have a static app that can be served from any content server. You don't need an actual, you don't need any dynamic server. You just need a content server. And you can throw that into the GitHub Pages branch of your add-on, and GitHub Docs will just do the rest. So it's a really cool developer experience from installing this add-on to getting it published onto GitHub Pages.
Nice.
And it's all tied with your repository. So anyone who has collaboration access to your repository will be able to do this. It really makes a lot of sense. I think it's a really good pattern.
Super cool. And I assume you take care of all that GitHub Pages deployment stuff. It's just there's a lot that we can do for you. I think there might be 1 or 2 settings you have to change in GitHub, but compared to when I had to do all this myself for Mirage's first site, 3 years ago or whatever, it's really come a long way. So yeah, while we're developing it, I'm rewriting Mirage's Docs site using it locally. Nice.
So
dog fooding it.
Dog fooding it, exactly. And so once it's ready, basically we want to ship it once I'm able to successfully port over Mirage's site to the new thing. That's at that point when we have search basically is the main thing left. We'll feel good enough to ship this as something that other people can use.
Awesome. Mirage's docs are amazing. So I feel like if you can build an add-on that accommodates that, then this add-on's in a good spot.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I always wanted in Mirage's docs was like examples. And now we can actually do live examples because there's an Ember app with a Mirage server running. So people always ask about many-to-many. And yeah, I can add a docs page to my Jekyll app and write about it. But wouldn't it be better if I could just show you the models in the Ember app? You can click on them in the Ember app. You can even pull down Mirage's repository and run Ember serve and see an example of them.
You can open Ember Inspector.
You can open Ember Inspector and see the data in your inspector. And then you see the Mirage code right there. And then you can just simulate, like click here to hit save. And I can just show you the logs. And so when it comes to helping people understand how to wire up more of the complicated relationships like many-to-many or polymorphic, I can just have a scenario. I can have examples of all those things right in the Mirage website, in the docs website. And those are going to serve as the thing that I'm going to run my acceptance tests against. So in my acceptance tests, I already run through all these different scenarios for different database schemas. But now I'll just run those against the scenarios in the public docs so people can see.
Okay, so wait, hold on. Let me get this straight. By writing documentation with example code that's an Ember app, you now have a website that's testable.
Yes.
So that you know your app, you know your code is working correctly, you know your add-on is working correctly.
Not only do you know your code and add-on is working, you know that the docs
the docs, that's another thing. You know the docs are working as well.
Yes. So your docs are a testable implementation of your add-on.
I feel like this is a new buzzword, like testable docs.
Testable docs.
Nice.
I think they like Rust or something like that it has something like this where they run examples in their readmes or something like that. But this is like, to me, this is, as an add-on author, this is exactly what I want, right? I want, when you're coming to a point where you're like, I'm going to add this API and I want to document it or I want to test it, it's the same thing. Like, in order to test it, I need to document it.
Yeah. Well,
in order to document it, I need to test it. And so it's like two birds with one stone.
Yeah. And not only that, when I come into a new app, like a new Rails app, one of the first places I look is the spec folder, the test folder. Because no matter what people say, no matter like what backstory they give me or documentation they've written, like the tests are probably the best place to find out how the app actually functions.
Right.
So it's pretty cool. It's almost like you're just forcing that. Like you're forcing that you're marrying those two worlds of tests and documentation.
Yep. And people test their add-ons. They're good about it. It contributes to like their Ember Observer score. So that we come a lot of add-ons that we use and they're well tested. But then the docs are always the last thing to go. Like they're the first thing to go in terms of people are pressed for time and they don't want to put together some. So if we can provide some building blocks that make it nice to have a beautiful website and make it easy to put all these examples of your components, you're writing those tests anyways. If it's as easy to do it using our components, you're going to have a great looking doc site for it as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. I'm excited about it.
Nice.
So yeah, that should be ready. That's just kind of working on the side, but it should be ready, relatively soon. So
2 weeks.
yeah, exactly.
Standard developer answer.
Right, 2 weeks time, and then multiply it times 2 times 2 times 2. So
Yeah. Maybe another times too.
Cool. All right. Well, nice chatting with you. Thanks
Likewise.
everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week.